Hey, all, Sky here. First, I want to take a second to thank all the show's listeners, sponsors, and supporters for helping make this show what it is. I literally couldn't do it without you. And now I want to tell you about the newest way to help support the show. Whenever you shop at Amazon.com, stop by ScottHorton.org first, and just click the Amazon logo on the right side of the page. That way the show will get a kickback from Amazon's end of the sale. It won't cost you an extra cent. And it's not just books. Amazon.com sells just about everything in the world, except cars, I think. So whatever you need, they've got it. Just click the Amazon logo on the right side of the page at ScottHorton.org, or go to ScottHorton.org/Amazon. All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. I'm Scott Horton. This is my show, The Scott Horton Show. Our next guest today is Marjorie Cohn. She is now at the Thomas Jefferson School of Law at, the University of San Diego, is that it? And she's formerly, of course, the president of the National Lawyers Guild. I'm sorry, did I botch the name of your university, Marjorie?
It's not, it's Thomas Jefferson School of Law.
Oh, okay.
But it's an independent law school.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So just I got it right, just drop the second part. Okay, good.
Right,
And you're the author of a brand new book coming out, a lot of books previously, but the brand new one is Drones and Targeted Killings, which, apropos to today's topic, first of all, thank you very much for joining us today. Sorry for the disjointed introduction there. I appreciate you coming on the show.
My pleasure, Scott.
Okay, and now, so yesterday, and they did this back last time around too, the government announced in advance that they are conspiring to murder an American citizen overseas somewhere. They handed the story. It seemed like a very top-down official leak, not a whistleblower-type disclosure, right? It was sort of an official government leak to Kimberly Dozier of the Associated Press, and they assert that there's an American citizen, member of Al-Qaeda, it seemed like maybe they were referring to Pakistan, I don't know, and they don't know what to do about him, so they're going to kill him. Or at least they're looking at it, and it didn't seem like any of the questions they were looking at were whether they had the authority to do so or not, but just, whether it seemed right for, relations with the country we'll be bombing, et cetera, like that. I pretty much understand the story, right, you think?
Well, I think, Scott, that according to the AP reports, they've been weighing the benefits of killing a U.S. citizen versus the possibility of a likely outcry internationally. So they're concerned with the politics of it. They're not concerned with the legality of it. Eric Holder has redefined due process to say that the Justice Department is going to provide the due process. Of course, that's the executive branch. The due process is provided by the judicial branch. That's the courts, and the courts are supposed to make a determination when are supposed to approve things that like this. Due process means a notice of the charges against you and an opportunity to be heard, and yet they're circumventing this due process. Another interesting thing that the AP said is that according to a U.S. official, the Defense Department was divided over whether this man is dangerous enough to merit the potential domestic fallout of killing an American without charging him with a crime or trying him. The Supreme Court said in the Hamdi case, Hamdi versus Rumsfeld, during the Bush administration, that if the president is going to keep a U.S. citizen as an enemy combatant, then that person has to be given due process. And that means arrested, charged with a crime, brought to trial, and given an opportunity to defend himself, not just taken out with a drone, which, by the way, usually kills innocent civilians along the way. So, it doesn't seem like anything much has changed since the hoopla and the outcry when Obama gave his speech last May about how we're really just going to kill the bad guys. We're going to be really careful about it. We're going to obey the law, and that was shortly after the leak of a white paper. And this was a leak; it wasn't intended to be public. Where the white paper actually says that the government can kill a U.S. citizen who's not on the battlefield, if some high government official, not a judge, but some high government official thinks that the target is a senior al-Qaeda leader who poses an imminent threat of a violent attack against the United States. So how do they define imminent? Well, according to this white paper, the U.S. citizen can be killed even when there's no clear evidence that a specific attack on U.S. persons and interests will take place in the immediate future. So basically, we have this global battlefield where if there's someone anywhere who might be associated with al-Qaeda, according to a high government official, then Obama can authorize that he be taken out without any checks and balances. And this is illegal. The only time that armed force can be used against someone who's not on the battlefield is where there is an imminent threat. That means it's going to happen right away, that somebody is going to be attacking us. And, you know, the Obama administration justifies these drone attacks, which, by the way, Obama has used much more extensively than Bush ever did. The Obama administration, and Bush as well, says that these drone strikes are authorized under the Authorization for the Use of Military Force, the AUMF, that Congress passed a few days after 9/11. But if you read the AUMF, it doesn't authorize this. The AUMF allows the president to use force only against groups and countries that had supported the 9/11 attacks. But when the Bush administration asked Congress at the time for open-ended military authority to deter and preempt any future acts of terrorism or aggression against the United States, Congress specifically rejected that open-ended military authority. So Congress has not authorized this. It's not clear whether Congress would authorize it. And during the debate last year about these drone strikes and targeted killing, members of Congress from both the Republican and the Democratic parties demanded that potential American targets be given a chance to surrender and mount a defense in U.S. courts instead of just being killed without a trial.
Well, let me ask you this. We've already seen the strikes, of course, on al-Awlaki and his son, and the strike on al-Awlaki also killed another American citizen, Khan. And then the son, there are various classified leaks, but the official ones that was some sort of accident, some kind of thing. But they, in any case, they have killed American citizens, and deliberately, certainly in the case of al-Awlaki Sr. over there. But I wonder why you think that they don't go ahead and say, for example, why didn't they try him in absentia on a treason charge and go ahead, convict him and sentence him to death and then drone strike him? Because then at least they would have the pretense of the rule of law, where instead they're reduced to this argument that if the two different hemispheres of Obama's brain agree, or anyone he delegates the authority to, that amounts to due process of law.
Well, you know, they could have done that, and certainly they could have given him an opportunity to appear, either personally or through counsel. But, you know, the interesting thing is that the New York Times, and this is I think it was yesterday. No, today's New York Times. Today's New York Times says that of the 4 Americans that, you know, Obama has admitted killing with the drone strikes, including al-Awlaki, and this is from the New York Times, according to the White House, only Mr. al-Awlaki had been intentionally targeted. Well, you had 3 Americans who were killed in the drone attack where al-Awlaki was targeted, and then 2 weeks later, his son, al-Awlaki's 16-year-old son, who had never been involved in any kind of terrorist group at all, was sitting at a cafe, an outdoor cafe, and was eating, I don't know if he was eating pizza, what he was eating, and another drone, American drone, targeted him and killed him. You know, this was not an accident, and the administration has never explained why they killed this child. But, you know, there's another thing that I think we need to talk about here, Scott, and that is that yesterday Jeremy Scahill and Glenn Greenwald wrote a piece in The Intercept about the NSA's secret role in this assassination program. And evidently...
Hold that thought just one second, because I was hoping that you could answer why you think that they don't bother going through with any kind of rule of law procedure. Is it just sort of the David Addington attitude that they want to set the precedent that they can do whatever they want? Is that what Obama's up to here? Because, again, they could easily have convicted al-Awlaki in a court in Virginia. With or without
Well,
him?
they may or may not have. They may or may not have. I mean, sometimes they don't have the evidence. You know, why didn't they arrest bin Laden and bring him to trial? I mean, I know everybody cheered how wonderful, you know, bin Laden was assassinated, but you know, if Obama were going to stick to the rules that he set, not just for U.S. citizens, but for anybody in his May speech and in a fact sheet and a directive that he didn't release that was classified, when the SEALs went in to bin Laden's compound, he wasn't armed. They could have captured him. They could have brought him back for trial. You know, keep in mind that, and this is important to keep in mind.
You know, if there's such a thing as an enemy combatant in the world, it was that guy. He's not an American-born citizen like Alaki and his boy.
Well, you know what? Nobody deserves to be killed, taken out without due process. Due process under our Constitution protects everybody, not just U.S. citizens. And let me just tell you something. The answer to that argument that, well, bin Laden's a bad guy, we know he did it, let's just take him out. After World War II, after the Holocaust, where, you know, some of the absolute worst crimes in the history of man were committed by the Nazis, there was a dispute among the leaders of the victorious countries, and Winston Churchill said about what to do with the Nazi leaders, and Winston Churchill said, just take them out and shoot them. And Justice Robert Jackson, who was a U.S. Supreme Court justice on leave to be the chief U.S. prosecutor at Nuremberg, said, no, we can't do that. If we don't provide due process for these people, give them a fair trial, even these Nazis who have done these horrible things, then we will pass a poisoned chalice to future generations. And they were tried, and there's even some criticism about the trial that it wasn't fair enough, these Nuremberg tribunals. But some people were acquitted, some people were convicted, some people were actually put to death. So when you have the Nazis who committed genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity on a massive scale, and due process was good enough for them, then how do we get off saying that we're going to allow the president with no judicial or congressional oversight whatsoever to kill anybody he wants that he might suspect of being a bad guy? You know, he does these things called signature strikes, where even if they don't have a name, even if they don't know who they're targeting, if people are present in the area where there are suspicious patterns of behavior, they're dropping bombs from drones on them and killing lots and lots of innocent people. And so I think it's important. Yes, it's an outrage that they would do this to a U.S. citizen. It's also an outrage, and not only that, illegal, to do it to anybody. The United Nations Charter, which is a treaty the United States has ratified, it's part of U.S. law under the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution, says that the only time you can use military force is in self-defense or when the Security Council approves it. Neither of those two things have happened here. Now, that doctrine has been expanded a bit to include protection against an imminent threat. But there's, you know, these people are sitting around, you know, they're sitting drinking coffee, you know, in their on their porch. They're not on the battlefield.
Right. I'm sorry, I got to interrupt you because we're going to have to go out and take this break real quick. But I hope that you can hang on through this short break, and then we can finish up, and then I'll let you. I'm sorry I interrupted you. I wanted to let you finish what you had to say about the new reporting of Scahill and Greenwald about the NSA and the drone program. Can you hang on with us?
Yes.
Okay, great. Everyone, it's Marjorie Cohn from the Thomas Jefferson School of Law, a former president of the National Lawyers Guild, and we will be right back after this. What was the only interest group in D.C. pushing war with Syria last summer? AIPAC and the Israel lobby. What's the only interest group in D.C. pushing to sabotage the nuclear deal with Iran right now? AIPAC and the Israel lobby. Why doesn't the president force an end to the occupation of Palestine, a leading cause of terrorist attacks against the United States? AIPAC and the Israel lobby. The Council for the National Interest is pushing back, putting America first and educating the people about what's really at stake in the Middle East. Help support their important work at councilforthenationalinterest.org. All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. I'm Scott Horton. I'm talking with the author of the new book, Drones and Targeted Killings, Marjorie Cohn, professor of law at the Thomas Jefferson School of Law. What a great name for a school of law, right? All right. So thank you very much for holding on through the break there. Marjorie. And now, I guess, where were we? I know you know where you were.
Well, I think it's important for people to know that Jeremy Scahill and Glenn Greenwald exposed a very, very frightening practice yet in yesterday's edition of The Intercept, and that is the NSA's, the National Security Agency, who's been collecting all of our phone calls and emails, their secret role in the U.S. assassination program. Instead of using human intelligence, they're using electronic surveillance. So they're using cell phone tracking technology and then killing people based on these cell phone locations. The problem is that, first of all, targets are increasingly aware that the NSA is relying on this geolocating, and they've moved to thwart that tactic. Other people are unaware their cell phone is being targeted. They lend their phone to friends, children, spouses, and family members. There's a top secret NSA document that was leaked by Edward Snowden that confirms that the NSA played a key supporting role in the drone strike that killed al-Awlaki. They also cite a recent study by a U.S. military advisor that during 1 year in Afghanistan, where the majority of drone strikes have taken place, that unmanned vehicles, drones, were 10 times more likely than conventional aircraft to cause civilian casualties. And another NSA document provided by Snowden says that by 2009, for the first time in the history of the U.S. Air Force, more pilots were trained to fly drones than conventional aircraft, leading to a tipping point in U.S. military combat behavior, resorting to airstrikes in undeclared wars such as Yemen and Pakistan. So this is very disturbing because here we have two illegal, controversial, immoral policies of the Obama administration that seem to be helping each other, feeding each other, and that is the NSA surveillance program and the illegal assassination with drone strikes.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I'm sure you saw that last week Associate Justice Antonin Scalia said that, hey, in times of war, the law falls silent, and in fact, he kind of mocked anyone who would be so naive as to think that we won't see, for example, another mass roundup of Americans maybe based on their heritage, like what happened to the Japanese and some Germans, too, during World War II. And so what about that? What about, never mind exactly what the AUMF says, there's a war on, don't you know?
Well, you know, the Bush administration justified a lot of its illegal policies with this so-called war on terror. Now, that's a misnomer because terrorism is a tactic. It's not an enemy. You don't declare war on a tactic. And yet, under the guise of this war on terror, Bush and now Obama, although Obama doesn't use the words war on terror, he talks about war on Al-Qaeda and other things. They're literally getting away with murder. You know, all of the people who were killed and tortured during the Iraq war, which is, you know, never had to happen and has wreaked all kinds of havoc there. People are still suffering. The war in Afghanistan, which, you know, may never come to an end. Obama's going to wait until Karzai is no longer there so that he can keep American troops there in a supportive role, which basically means keep our footprint there so we can control things. And then Obama's policies, he has not closed Guantanamo. People are still being indefinitely detained. People are still being force-fed who are on hunger strikes. Force-feeding constitutes torture, according to the UN Human Rights Commission. And the surveillance, overwhelming surveillance that Edward Snowden has revealed of all of us. And this illegal assassination program taking people out all over the world, wherever they may be suspicious. You know, with no checks and balances, and it's very disturbing. And I think that people have to, and increasingly people are getting very upset about this. But it's important not just to be upset, but also to put pressure on those people who respond to pressure, which is your congresspersons, the White House. Email them, call them, demonstrate, send them letters, and make your feelings known. When you see a news article about this in a newspaper, write a letter to the editor. It's easy to do. You keep it under 150 words. You peg it to the article or to the op-ed. And even if yours doesn't get published, they count the number of letters on each side, and the ones they do publish reflect the balance of how many letters they receive. So even if your letter doesn't get published, it's going to help other letters to get published. So I think that it's really important not just to sit by and see, all of these many hundreds of women and children who have been killed, wedding parties killed with these drones. The next thing is drones that aren't even operated at all, even remotely, that are totally computerized. So a computer decides who to target. You don't even have somebody sitting 6,000 miles away in Nevada with a joystick controlling the drones. So the technology is developing to such a point that, George Orwell is probably turning over in his grave.
Yeah, well, hey, the computer says, and it has a lot more authority than me. I'm just a lowly drone operator, so hit the red button, right? The light's green. All right, and here's the other thing, too. You mentioned the war against the Nazis and the Imperial Japanese in World War II. America's involvement in that only lasted 3.5 years. And this is, of course, as we can see with the wars in Somalia, Yemen, Pakistan, etc., and spreading on into Turkey, Lebanon, Syria, and everywhere else, that this is a self-perpetuating kind of thing. As Leon Panetta explained to David Gregory, the fact that we make more terrorists every time we kill a couple in Yemen, that we make many more than we killed, is tough, because these are the tools we have, so we have to keep using them. And so they can just keep this going forever and ever and ever. So if the law really is silent, then really all bets are off.
The law is not silent, as I said, Scott. It's very clearly illegal what they're doing. And yes, it's not just illegal, immoral, but it's also backfiring, as you said. When people see their loved ones being killed with a drone, they hate the U.S. even more. They want to do the U.S. harm. And if you really want to stop terrorism, you don't, decide to kill more and more and more people and torture them and keep them indefinitely in prisons like animals. You do a complete reassessment of U.S. foreign policy to see why people hate us so much, and it's not because of our democracy. It has nothing to do with that. It's because of our foreign policy. It's because of the fact that we have 800 bases all over the world with American soldiers. It's because Americans invade their countries and occupy their lands and support countries that mount illegal occupations and torture their people and commit war crimes. That's why people hate us so much. And until there's a complete overhaul of U.S. foreign policy, we're going to be vulnerable to terrorism.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the problems that we're up against, though, is, as we've seen with Obama, the temptation of any leader, even say, for example, if it was Ron Paul's son, Mr. Constitution, who voted no on everything always, well, except the AUMF, unfortunately. But if his son was the president, I would expect him to act just like Obama and say, well, this is just too much power to give up. How could anyone really roll it back if they're the one in the chair, or allow it to be rolled back?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what he would do. I don't know what anybody would do. I know that Rand Paul, although I don't favor most of his policies, has been very critical of U.S. foreign policy and the reliance on militarism. Hillary Clinton, who seems to be the front runner for the Democratic nomination and could probably have it if she wanted it, is really even more of a hawk than Obama. When she was a candidate, she said, "We are going to, quote, obliterate Iran," unquote. Obliterate Iran. Can you imagine a leader of this country saying we're going to obliterate an entire country? There was nothing she did as Secretary of State, or very little as Secretary of State, and before that as a U.S. Senator, that looked at other solutions before military ones. She really walked pretty much in lockstep with with Obama and with the neocons. So I don't see any major improvement if Hillary Clinton is elected president. I know a lot of people who support her, but I don't think that she would do much different than Obama is doing right now. I don't know what Rand Paul would do. It's very hard to say.
It sure is a lot of power to be the commander-in-chief of this military, and especially even during just a pseudo war and not a real one, a Cold War would do, right? Like the Cold War with Iran. Let me ask you this real quick before the end of the show, if I could, Marjorie. What do you know about any progress toward getting the 6,000-page torture report of the Senate Intelligence Committee released, or at least significant portions of it that we can look at?
Well, I know that many people in Congress have been clamoring to see that report, and yet it remains classified. I don't know. Maybe there's a whistleblower who will publicize that information, but they seem to be keeping it held pretty tightly under lock and key. So I don't know. I mean, Obama talks about transparency, and he has one of the most secret administrations really in the history of the country. So I don't think we're going to be seeing that report anytime soon.
I wonder if they're afraid that if the people saw what was really in there, that would lead to prosecutions. The game would be up at that point, you think?
Well, they're afraid of something. They're afraid of something. If they really had confidence that everything they did was legal, and if they don't intend to do it again, in other words, torture, then what are they hiding? What do they have to fear?
Right. Well, we just have to learn to respect their privacy, I guess.
No, not if they are acting in our name with our resources and putting us at risk. No, you can't just say that they have the right to be secret and private. I don't buy that.
Oh, no, I was just playing, of course. All right, thank you so much for your time. You stayed overtime. I really appreciate it, Marjorie.
No problem, Scott. Take care.
All right, everybody. That is the great Marjorie Cohn. Formerly, she is was the president of the National Lawyers Guild. She's now a professor at the Thomas Jefferson School of Law in San Diego, and she's got a brand new book coming out, Drones and Targeted Killings, which promises, as you just heard, to be absolutely great. All right, so that's it for the show, everybody. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back here tomorrow from 3 to 5 Eastern Time on the Liberty Express, and if you're on the Eastern Seaboard, why not head to D.C., and I'll see you Saturday at the International Students for Liberty Conference, at the FFF Conference within a conference. There, John Glaser and I are giving a talk on libertarianism versus the empire. It'd be nice to see you. All right. Take it easy. Talk at you tomorrow. Hey, y'all. Scott Horton here for cashintocoins.com. So you want to buy some Bitcoins? Cashintocoins.com makes it fast, easy, and safe to get Bitcoins. Just deposit the money into their account at any of the major banks they support, and then just email them a picture of the receipt and your Bitcoin address, and you get your Bitcoins. Almost always the same day it clears. In a tough, competitive new market, cashintocoins.com has the advantage. A great system and great customer service to keep you coming back. That's cashintocoins.com. Just click the link in the right margin at scotthorton.org. Don't worry about things you can't control. Isn't that what they always say? But it's about impossible to avoid worrying about what's going on these days. The government has used the war on guns, the war on drugs, and the war on terrorism to tear our Bill of Rights to shreds. But you can fight back. The 10th Amendment Center has proven it, racking up major victories. For example, when the U.S. government claimed authority in the NDAA to have the military kidnap and detain Americans without trial, the nullifiers got a law passed in California, declaring the state's refusal to ever participate in any such thing. Their latest project is offnow.org, nullifying the National Security Agency. They've already gotten model legislation introduced in California, Arizona, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kansas, meant to limit the power of the NSA to spy on Americans in those states. We'd be fools to wait around for the U.S. Congress or courts to roll back Big Brother. Our best chance is nullification and interposition on the state level. Go to offnow.org, print out that model legislation, and get to work nullifying the NSA. The hero Edward Snowden has risked everything to give us this chance. Let's take it. offnow.org. Hey y'all, Scott here. Man, I had a chance to have an essay published in the book Why Peace, edited by Mark Gutman, but I didn't understand what an opportunity it was. Boy, do I regret I didn't take it. This compendium of thoughts by the greatest anti-war writers and activists of our generation will be remembered and studied long into the future. You've got to get Why Peace. You've got to read Why Peace. It features articles by Harry Brown, Robert Naiman, Fred Bronfman, Dahlia Wasfy, Richard Cummings, Karen Kotowski, Butler Schaefer, Kathy Kelly, Robert Higgs, Anthony Gregory, and so many more. Why Peace? Because war is the health of everything wrong with our society. Get Why Peace. Down at the bookshop or Amazon.com. Just click the book in the right margin at scotthorton.org.